You're listening to the Sketchnote Army podcast. I'm your host, Mike Rohde, the author of the Sketchnote Handbook and the Sketchnote Workbook, and this is the podcast where I chat with sketchnoters and visual thinkers and try to understand what makes them tick. Hey, are you looking for the ideal sketchbook for your sketchnoting practice? The Sketchnote Idea Book is the sketchbook designed for sketchnoters. Equipped with no bleed, no show-through paper, you can take almost any marker or pen you can throw at it. Get 10% off with code ARMY at airship.store. Hey everyone, it's Mike Rohde, and I'm here today with Justin Hamacher. Justin, good to have you here.
Hello, very happy to be here.
So you're an interesting guy. We've been connecting. We've been connected for years and years, and you sort of popped back up in my life recently. You've come from the design background, a lot like me, but you've done a shift, which I found was really interesting, and it seemed like it could be really fascinating to bring you on the show. Not only as a designer and what you're doing now, but you're also a visual thinker, and you've done something interesting in this new direction you've gone by integrating visual thinking into the training that you've taken. So rather than me try to explain it, because I don't know the details, tell us who you are and what you do. And then if you'd like, go right into your origin story, like from a little boy. How did you end up to this moment now?
Oh, man. How many hours do we have? I'll do my best. I'm so happy to be here. And this is a wonderful space for the community to learn about individuals and how they use visual thinking. It's striking to me how relegated it is by the educational system and by our employers and other places, really into a background or kind of novelty identity. And it's, for some of us, it's the way our brain works, you know.
Yes.
And it's so hard to have to put things into writing or words or other things without being able to be visual. So I'm really happy this is taking place. Let's see. So I'll just kind of pop back to when I was little, and then we can work our way forward. Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah.
Okay. So one of my very first memories, I swear I'm not going to talk for hours, I was just joking, is I remember being in preschool and drawing a bird and sitting there and not knowing any other kids. Actually, it was kindergarten because I knew the kids in preschool. And, you know, feeling like some anxiety, and the room seemed really big and there was a lot of other people around me I didn't know. I wasn't afraid, but I was a very extroverted kid. You know, but cautious and a little shy. And I was drawing this bird, and I knew how to draw feathers on a bird. If I look back at the bird now, it's rather comedic. But at the time, for other little kids, they thought that was really cool. And I remember this one little boy coming over, and he didn't know me, but he saw me drawing, and he said, "Whoa, you can draw feathers on a bird. Oh my gosh." And he knew the other kids because they'd gone to preschool or something. And he ran over and grabbed like 4 kids and brought them to the table where I was sitting alone. And they were all like, "Will you show me how to draw feathers on birds? I want to draw feathers on birds. Oh my gosh." And it felt so good to be expressing myself in a way that was personal. I wasn't like holding up the bird feather drawing or something, but to have it resonate with people and to have people want to learn and share. And then I was able to look at what they were drawing and stuff. And it was just a really wonderful start to kindergarten. So, you know, I knew from being really young, my main identity was an artist. And I drew a lot from myself, scribbled on the interior walls of my closet in my bedroom as a little kid. When my mom didn't know about that until we moved when I was around 10, and she was like, "Oh my God, what did you do in here?" And there's just, you know, a whole cosmology on the interior. Yeah, just scribbles and stuff though. But so going through school, it was not easy. I went to parochial schools, so little Catholic grade schools, and they hated drawing. I'm not, universally going to say they all did, but most of my teachers specifically would tell me to stop drawing and to take better notes and to write down what was being said exactly as it was being said, not to elaborate or have an imagining come off what I was recording. And that was really stifling, because you as a creative guy, myself as a creative guy, other creative people, you have lots of ideas and you want to kind of suss out the tendrils and see where they go and what they might become. You don't have to follow all of them, but that's how you keep your mind alive, you know? So that was really challenging, going through all parochial school and pretty much continually being told, don't imagine, don't do those things. I do remember in third grade, there was a big contest for the grade school. The grade school is called Our Lady of Fatima in Seattle, Washington, Magnolia. If anybody out there happens to be from that grade school, what's up? And we had a contest for the city of the future. And it was all the grades, all the students in each grade, 8th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade, 5th grade, down to first grade. Each student was going to do a drawing, and then the class would elect one big representative drawing, and then we would make a big drawing and put it on the exterior of our classroom door. And then the teachers would walk around and vote on which class they thought did the coolest one. And I was in third grade, and my thing was a city of the future that had sky cars and floating houses and gardens where people could eat and solar stuff and all. It was good, surprisingly, because I used to, like most kids, like to draw battleships and Star Wars kind of stuff. But for some reason, I laid off that and I drew this. Well, it won for the class, and then it won for the whole school. And I remember that feeling so good to see like 7th and 8th graders walking by our little third grade classroom and looking at the drawing and being like, wow, all right, who did that? Oh, Justin, you did that? What's up, kid? Like, I was like, oh man,
good job, man.
Yeah, this feels good. Some of the other ones were battleships and big space wars and stuff. And I think the teachers wanted to go with a more holistic kind of view of the future. Maybe we could share it with our politicians or something. Anyway, so yeah, grade school, high school, becoming more comfortable with an artist's identity, but at the same time really kind of becoming there were moments of misanthropy, but like just angry at the society and becoming a punk rock musician out of that. And then my identity in Seattle after college was a punk rock musician for like 10 or 15 years. But in college, I majored in woodblock printmaking. My parents wanted to kill me, but I was inflexible on that point. They made me promise to minor in something they saw some utility in. So
something practical.
Yeah. So English and psychology were the minors. And then fast forward to life, just young musician, art teacher, teaching kindergarten art, which was freaking awesome and my favorite job of my entire life. It was just wonderful how broad their imaginations were. And also the little boys and little girls, they hadn't quite been pushed into emotional regulations associated to gender. So there were some really caring little boys that like would give each other hugs when they came to class, and it was just great. It was just like such a free, wild little group of people. Did that for a few years, and then let's see, I was having trouble paying my bills. So as you can imagine, traditional woodblock printmaking in the year 1999, not really viable.
High demand, yeah.
No. Also, it was really hard to get access to presses, like to do litho. There were a couple good places in Seattle, but those presses are huge and they're expensive, and I didn't have the money to join those memberships to participate in them. So went back to school, became a designer, went to Cornish. I didn't actually want to become a designer. I wanted to go back and study sculpture and video, but the head of the art department was sick the day I went in to do interviews, and the design chair was there, and she said, "You can take sculpture and video as electives. I'll give you a scholarship if you join design." And I was broke, and I thought, well, okay, let's do it. So did that for 2 years, got out. All my classmates were in, this is a while ago, there was no Amazon in Seattle. At all. You'd go
Microsoft back then up in Redmond, right?
Yeah, that was about it. The big design companies people were interested in, if you were a designer, were Starbucks and REI. Those were the two places young designers wanted to work. I wanted to have nothing to do with that. I still was, pretty central in my punk rock ethos. So I was like, I'm going to
say, punk rock would be resisting all that stuff, right?
Oh my God. Yeah. I'll drink a Starbucks now, but back then you'd have to like pin me down and pour it in my mouth. I'm not kidding. So I started my own small design studio and worked with small businesses, and I loved it. So coffee shops, bakeries, massage parlors, therapists, artist websites, boutiques. It was great. And that was really what got me interested in user research too. So having those conversations with business owners and really hearing about their needs, and like having to unwire my brain in design school at the time. We didn't even talk about UX. That wasn't a thing. So we were trained to, as I know you love comic books, like what was going to be our superpower and how were we going to be the authority that came in and solved in a heroic way, whatever it was we were trying to solve. So I really had to unwire that from my brain. So I was doing small business stuff for a few years. Then I took a UX certificate course. Well, then the market crashed, right, in 2008. And I had a small business that was doing pretty well. The market crashed, and I lost all my clients. I had a lot of like real estate development clients in Seattle, like Paul Allen, some of his projects and stuff. And I tried to return the deposits to the people, and they wouldn't even return my calls. I don't know if
just poof disappeared.
They were just gone. So I had to go downtown to take a job, which I really did not want to do, but I had to. I'd borrowed some money from my sister to buy a motorcycle, and she was about to have a baby. And I was like, damn, I got to take care of this. So I went down and worked for a consultancy called Slalom, which was small at the time. Now it's pretty big. And then they had like a educational program where they'd pay you to take some classes. So I took some at UW, got into UX certificate program, really liked it, really liked the people, the instructors. That program used to be called technical communication. So it had more of a scholarly HCI orientation, like understanding how humans
more academic,
Yeah, and I really appreciated that. So anyway, got a master's in that, and then I started switching companies, worked in gaming, went from consulting to gaming, and then from gaming, I joined a small Indian company, and that was a crazy ride. So that started getting acquired, like 1,500 people, 8,500 people, 16,000 people, 33,000 people. Yeah, and finally Samsung bought it. And I was along for that ride, and I was the UX director, then I was a creative director, then I was a global creative director, and I was going to India and managing a team there, flying there and stuff. But I was not happy. So if you have a line for career trajectory going like that, and you have another line for like my spirit, my creative soul, it was going like that.
The other way.
Yeah. And that led to crisis, not like a explosion or an implosion, but a lot of nightmares at night, kind of archetypal nightmares about not expressing the self and feeling lost. Anyway, I luckily couldn't stick with that. I went to Spain on vacation, and while I was there on the island of Menorca, in a cave actually, which sounds crazy, I realized I had to just quit that job. So I came back and my boss wouldn't let me quit the job. He kept canceling all our meetings.
Wow.
Like I wanted to quit, and he kept canceling. I wanted to do it nicely, and he kept canceling all these meetings for 3 weeks. And finally I was just like, dude, like, you gotta meet with me. Like, in my head, I'm like, I'm not gonna be here Monday unless you do this. So that led to me going to the University of Washington and becoming a full-time professor there, teaching human-computer interaction and design. And while I was there working with graduate students, I really tried to form a bridge between design and the computational realm and the fine arts. That was kind of my personal mandate. They weren't super excited about that. I think the art department was. They were like, oh my God, a designer's actually coming over here and talking to us. Like, we'd love to talk to you guys, but you never do. But for some reason, design was pretty insular and kind of at the time trapped in a typography spiritual realm or something, where they thought it was like the end all be all for all forms of visual expression, right? But I loved that. I was there for 2 years, and then I was in an experimental program, so it was funded by departments, and then we free floated in the middle. They reorged that, and the director left, and I left. And then I went and started training as a Jungian analyst. So that was the big pivot point for me. It was like...
Yes. That's right. What I wanted to get to. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Make sure we covered.
Yeah. So doing the self-inventory, it was like, what lights you up? What are you most excited about? It was like, I like helping people, working with people, having a chance to hear their personal stories, and using creative means to help people self-actualize or get to other levels of their consciousness or other spaces in their consciousness. So that kind of brings us to today. I think I just talked for 20 minutes. And I've been training for 7 years as an analyst, first in Boston for 2 years, then for 5 years in Zurich. And now I'm what's called a diploma candidate. So I have a small practice here in Portland where I do analysis with folks. And I'm also a licensed psilocybin facilitator. So I do both those things here in Portland, Oregon. How the visual stuff ties into all this is, as I became a creative director and stuff, luckily you get to set the tone for a lot of your projects. And the clients do, the more high-end and imaginal clients want wild ideas, and they want sketches. They like that. If you're a B-rate consultancy, you're going to give them wireframes. If you're an A-rate consultancy, you'll give them those wireframes, but you're also going to give them storyboards, and you're going to give them some imaginal stuff and really push the boundaries. The people that really love that the most are the CEOs. My experience has been, a lot of CEOs are pretty imaginative and do think big. Some aren't, but some get a bad rap for not being visionary enough. But if you can get them in the right context and break them away from all the VPs and everybody else and do some workshopping with them, they're incredible. Some of them are very imaginative people. So I was able to do more and more drawings. But as I got into my training, would you like me to just kind of start into that, or do you want to break off?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
No, it's just that I like the flow.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll share some visual artifacts with folks too, if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So I left the UW and University of Washington, and I had my dad had an RV for his business, and I knew I needed to be in Boston to interview at the Jung Institute there I think it was in late June, and my dad was a character, not always very friendly, and he called out of the blue and he said, I was expecting to fly there, probably, though I'd woken up like 3 months earlier in the middle of the night, and I'd done this drawing with a map of the United States and all these different towns and places, and I drew my cat on it, and it kind of became a joke for my students that I was going to leave the University of Washington to go on this big RV trip with my cat, and then they knew I was going to interview to be an analyst, and some of them were excited about that, or to train to be an analyst. But I didn't have a way to make that happen. So suddenly my dad calls and he's like, hey, do you want the RV for a month? And the exact timing I need it. I hadn't mentioned the trip. I hadn't mentioned anything about it. And I was like, are you kidding? Like, that's insane. And he didn't make offers like that very much. So it was the first bit of synchronicity around that training. I drove across the country, and as I drove, I really wanted to have an open-hearted and a imaginative experience going. And I decided the best way to do that was with people and meeting people. So each place I went that I met an interesting person, I drew them as a card.
Oh, wow.
And then and then I kept these with me. And then each next town I would go to, I would write at night. I would go to a cafe or a pub, and I would journal all the people I met. This was so awesome to have done this because I met more and more people, right? Yeah, I start with five drawings, and then I'm at a pub drawing, and suddenly more people are coming and being like, what are you drawing? What's your story? So I'm meeting all these really cool people by doing these drawings. So I did this big deck of all these people. It was really fun. And then that one's super funny. You can see the guy's crack there. The kid going crazy.
In Duluth.
Yeah, some coffee shops. So I made this big deck, and it was one of the funnest things about it was I got back to this young woman. Was so cool. She was in Rockport, and she had just started a jewelry business and was really making a go at it, and out on the end of this pier. So I bought a ring from her and some other things. It's just a great way to remember trips and journeys. Yeah. And then when I got home, I think the most fun thing about it probably was sitting with my friends, and they were like, how was your trip? And I'd lay these out on a table, like a big tarot deck or something, and go, these are all the people I met. Who would you like to hear about? And they were like, what? And then they'd put their finger on one, and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's Josh in Woodstock. He was super nice when I parked my car, and he gave me some help, and then it was just kind of really fun. So I started with that, and that was a great tone setting for the start of my Jungian studies. I was accepted to that institute, and then I came back to Seattle, and I got a job at a startup, and I made the startup agree that I could have the first Thursday and Friday of each month off, because I had to fly to Boston Friday, Saturday, Sunday of each month. The first part, we had classes there. So I was doing that training. So they were into that. This is kind of what I'm super excited about, is to share a few of these.
Yeah, another big stack.
Oh my God. So the very first day I'm in Boston, I fly out there, and I've got my Fabriano Bristol board style drawing pad, really crisp, recycled, nice paper. And I'm going to draw, I was going to go to Cambridge and draw some of the churches and the buildings at Harvard and other stuff. And I had that, and I had my laptop, and I'm super into this training. I'm like, oh, dude, this is going to be life-changing, and this is the path forward for me, and I'm all in, I'm committed to this. I can't believe I got it. So excited. The first lecturer stands up to start to teach, and I have my laptop open, and I'm like, I gotta capture everything they say. Oh my gosh, there's gonna be so much here, and we had to read these things beforehand, and I don't want to miss anything. And I happen to have my sketch pad there with, a few architectural drawings, and it was really like this kind of two roads diverged in the woods moment. It was like this Robert Frost kind of moment. He started talking, and I hadn't thought about it. I wasn't like, I'm gonna draw the lectures. I just was like, it was such a natural decision. I just closed the laptop and I picked up my sketch pad and I just started drawing. And I hadn't ever really sketchnoted. I'd always had this distinction. Like, I'd write my notes, and then on some other pages I might draw some wild drawings, like, ooh, here's whatever, and I'm
kind of separated from each other.
Yeah, almost cognitively. Like, here's the purely imaginal realm. Here's the Apollinaire, thinking function realm where all that's being captured. So I sat down and I just did it, and I didn't stop. So for 7 years, I've drawn all these lectures in real time, and they're
pretty
done
detailed.
with. Yeah, they're really detailed, and they're done with crisp. I use a Statler pen, architectural pen, and then I use a Copic marker, and I've got just a ton of them.
Wow.
So, yeah, and they're each really specific to that lecturer on that date and that topic we were talking about. So we're trying to make a book of these. I have about 180 pages, and it would be, this one's kind of cool. Shows you how to analyze dreams.
Oh, wow.
Like a body scan methodology we learned about and some other things. Yeah. So this will be a book, and also my thesis when I finish my training. The book is about how people... Well, it has all those artifacts. So it's kind of like autoethnography, arts-based research looking at myself. But then there's a companion portion, which is how do people creatively process psychically rich material or heavy material? Like what are the means we do that by? And I'll interview a bunch of Jungian analysts to talk to them about how they, in their training, learned all the stuff that was required. Like, how does a choreographer or a dancer get through this material? How does an architect? How does a painter? How does a designer? How does an artist? A musician? Accountant? How do people handle this material? And, it's a matter of how do you embody it? How do you retain it? How do you comprehend it? How do you spark other areas of your imagination with it? And then how do you socialize it? Like, how do you come back to the community and enrich your learning and their learning by talking and sharing it? Yeah.
Enjoying this episode of the Sketchnote Army podcast? Visit sketchnotearmy.com/buymeacoffee to say thanks. Wow, there's so many questions I have after you kind of reveal this, so maybe I'll just sort of go in with the first one on the top of my head. It seems to me that your decision to choose between the laptop and drawing was really critical for you, now looking back. And it seems to me like the preparation before, like doing those little single squares over your trip out east, almost primed you for that moment. And it's an interesting choice because right now, personal knowledge management is this huge space, really valuable, right? Using these text editors like Rome Research or Obsidian, there's all kinds of tools out here, but it's very text-based. I think sometimes even to the exclusion of attachments, although that these systems do handle visuals in some basic way, that you could have gone in that direction and had this searchable database, but you chose to go in this other direction and that you were primed there. Would you say that that all this travel and I think the other thing it just is fascinating is that you limited yourself to this square, which to me says that you kept yourself from being overwhelmed by having this small space to work in. So you knew you could handle it, right? I could do this, like I could take a lunch and I can draw a square. I can handle that. You had reasonable minimums, but then you had the option to, later on, you talked about going to a pub or something or in your hotel or whatever, and then reflecting on that experience after having drawn it and then writing in more detail, which then led you to when your friend said, tell me about John and Fargo or whatever, that you could look at that image, that it would bring back all the memories, and then it would kind of tap back into the writing that you had probably done, whether it's long or short, that sort of sparked all these memories that you could then tell a whole story out of these seemingly limited artifacts. Even if you were to read the writings and look at the picture, there's way more in you that's tied to that only comes out when you're asked, right? So it's almost like you have to turn on that memory bank, and then that stuff comes flooding out, and you probably remember things as you're talking, and it gets broader. If you could probably keep going, right? That's really fascinating, and it's sort of, I guess for me, this is a big long ramble, reinforces this idea that visual thinking in this way, sketchnoting, if you want to call it that, using visuals as a way to remember, is really powerful, right? And I think you're sort of living proof in a lot of ways that this is actually doable. And it's not, and I think the thing I love about it is there's not a huge expectation or extra work that you had to do to enter into it. No. Is that a fair way to kind of?
Oh yeah, totally. I think there's, if we think about a divergent energy and a convergent energy, and things that are defined and things that are undefined, if we think about things in that way, these kind of panel drawings and sketchnoting are so wonderful because they are really launching points for more divergence. If we have an AI capturing all the text, or we have a volume from the philosopher or person we're interested in reading, that's concrete. Thoughts and ideas can come off of that, but it's often we're so devoted to the physical artifact and what it contains that we don't allow our minds to go beyond that container. And that's why I love these kind of things, because every time I tell the story, it's different. If I had written down 3 paragraphs, Josh and Fargo worked at such and such place. He wore these clothes and he helped me park my car. He seemed, if I were to do it, then I come back. My friends also don't really want to hear that. Like as a story, that's not a story. Yeah. That's like it's something else, So they're great for story building. And then if we're trying to have a living knowledge rather than a fixed knowledge, we need to feed the process somehow. And images are great for that, because images often lead to more images. If you have a dream, or you meditate, or you do psychedelics or something, and you have an image, it's like a river going by. Very naturally, next comes another image, next comes another image. Some you might want to grab, others you just let float by. But they seem like a very divergent and rich starting point for narratives. Yeah.
It's really fascinating when I compare like that work that you did, the travel, the panels, the writing, and then sketchnoting, basically your whole education. And I compare that back to, you started out by saying I went to this parochial school and all the teachers, at least in that location, were sort of trying to beat that out of you. And it focused toward a known, structured, rigid, listen to what we tell you and remember the things, very rote stuff would almost be like, in some ways, the opposite pole of like what you ended up doing with this work, right? Because the stuff that you captured, I almost think of it as like these things you did are the essence of the concept, and they can be endlessly generated from, right? So those squares, like I would think, the other thing I think that's interesting is context, right? So you draw a square of this person in this place. If one person asked you to tell the story, you would consider their context and maybe tell them a different story. And then this other person has a different context or interest, you would tell the story differently. It would probably reveal other details or things you were thinking that because that person asked you in their context, that would come up that might not have come up in the other story. So in a lot of ways, it's like this inexhaustible resource. I don't know, it's probably exhaustible, but I mean, it's generative, right? It's like we think of generative AI, and it can only work with the stuff that exists, and it's often not very good. But we as people are like the original generative, thinkers. So this sort of provides these generative starting points that can then, you can just keep on, using them in an interesting way.
Oh yeah. And we have our unconscious, we have that working for us. So if we start with an image, you might not know why or how, but a few other images are associating with it. And you might mention one of those to a friend as you're telling the story, or just even more empathetically, you might know they're a gardener and you're like, oh, right. Dude, I got to show you. Yeah, I met so-and-so at the Bread and Puppet Theater in Vermont. Olivia, she was so cool. And she showed me pictures of her sunflowers. And I couldn't believe, there's no sunflowers here.
Right.
But I know.
It's embedded, yeah.
Yeah. My friend is a gardener,
Interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe probably for those who don't know it, and like would include me, like what are the basic tenets of a Jungian approach to analysis of people? What are the components? And then I'm really fascinated, like how do visuals kind of fit into that? It seems like they were open to you doing this. Did they have a reaction to you sketchnoting every lecture and having this collection? Like what's the reaction from the Jungian space getting exposed to this visual thinking thing?
Yeah. So I've just been doing it for myself, and I was kind of that dude sitting in the back of the room constantly drawing, and then a couple people were peering over my shoulder and they're like, what the, that's wild. I was like, oh, thanks. This is just how I process and remember things. I have to do it this way. There's no other way. I would have quit if I wasn't allowed to do this because I would have been bored out of my skull. So I think if you're an artist too, you have to generate. Like we don't want to sit in a class and have a unidirectional podium delivery. We're not there to catch the confetti from what other people say. We want to be a part of the process and co-generate and co-create. So that's the other beauty of these kind of notes is they're co-creative. So the person's giving you information, you're adding that part of yourself to it, and then you come out with this melded thing, which has so much more energy for me and probably for you and for people like us than just sitting there and writing things down. Right. So, man, you put me on the spot with what are the foundations of the Jungian stuff and how
it's probably huge, right? That might be a podcast of its own, right?
It is actually, or a series, but I'll do my best. Images are foundational to.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, because what Jungians are trying to do in analysis is take the unconscious elements of it, bring it into consciousness, observe it, understand it, see where the blockages are, which we would call complexes, and where the opportunities are and where people want to be in their future selves, and then integrate it. So bring it all together. Well, we know the unconscious is just full of images. Like it's a cauldron being stirred and bubbles come up and you in a dream or you're on a long drive and your mind wanders and you're dissociating. You're like, where on earth did that memory come from or that image come from? So it's all image based and it's pre-language. Like if we go back through biological anthropology, before we had the spoken word and language, we had image. So the basis of this psychology is image based. We do that through a lot of dream analysis, working with fantasies, creative practices, sand play, is part of the Jungian realm, where you take figures, little kind of action figures, even almost, and in a sand tray, you will recreate a scenario or describe it there, and then the analyst will work with you to understand what it's about. But it's really super image based. But there's an issue in the Jungian realm. It's particularly there's such a strong intellectual component, and the educational environments have trouble letting go of the thinking function and really wanting to create taxonomies and categorize and microscopically dissect and understand things with so much intentionality that they can lose that divergent, free-flowing engagement with personal narratives in the unconscious. So that's a thing. I think if somebody doesn't get this book that I'm working on, they're kind of like, it's a parlor trick, or it's like a gimmick or something, like, that person just sits and listens to things. And then people that get it, though, it's like, no, that's how they embody it. Like, and we all have our own ways of doing that.
Right.
A child might, in class, they need a break. They might need to, if they're learning to spell words or something, they might prefer to go out on the playground and do jumping jacks while they spell words. Orange, O-R-A-N-G-E. That works for them because there's a somatic pathway into retention and embodiment and learning. So the biggest challenge for all of us, I think, in the world is calling a time out from the conventional realm and from the pressures and the voices and the demands, and beginning to understand individually how we learn and how we grow and how we can master this life experience, in a healthy way. That time out is probably the hardest thing because we know there's so many demands from society, family, and finances and things like that. Yeah.
Wow, that's really fascinating. Is there any kind of, if someone was wanting to go a little deeper, is there like a primer that they could look at or something to watch that might give them a little bit more depth? Because I would imagine it's a huge ocean of resources that you could get easily swept away in and lost in without some. And maybe that's something you give me a show note link, like you'd have to think about and give me some links if someone wanted to look further into Jungian, the Jungian space and understand what it means.
Yeah, I can give you some links to some books and some other things. Yeah, because it is really heady. I think what happens is people might pull the book off the top shelf and go, oh, dang, I can't, this isn't for me because I can't intellectually grasp it. But there's an entire other way to get into this knowledge, and that's what I'm trying to do here. Yeah,
you're sort of coming at it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So let's come back to the Jungian space and those practitioners and the other ones like you that maybe aren't as visual, or maybe they just haven't released the visual capabilities because they haven't really thought about it that way. They just came to it from schooling, right? You learn how to type stuff, or you write things. What has been their reaction to the sketchnotes? You talked about people, being surprised. How has that continued because obviously you have been dedicated. I see that stack of sheets. I mean, that's a significant investment. Obviously you need to do it because that's the way you work, but like there had to have been a reaction by not only students but professors. How do they react to that? Do they want copies of it? Do they want to know how to do it? Like all those, I'm curious about that side.
Yeah, absolutely. I have had professors request the sketches of their lectures because they were going to deliver additional lectures on that topic, and they thought that would be useful and good to share. I think a lot of the analysts that are running the Institute in Zurich are pretty forward thinking and imaginative, and they really do want to shift more into a feeling and artistic and visual space. So that's great. There's a real health around that. And I think there's a lot of people, I love what you just said about maybe they haven't discovered that capacity yet, because if you've ever taught little kids art and then watched them go through school and seen them as adults or our friends or ourselves, people have tremendous capabilities which get shut off by society. So it's important to have those small classes. I know you do a bunch of these and they're fantastic to just help people get back in touch with that, to oil the machinery, and with, no sense of shame, no sense of deliverables or a timeline, just in a very open way, go into it slowly and try to build that capacity. And folks are interested in that. And, when I began my training, I told a friend that was a poet and another friend at the university that I was starting this switch into this part of my life. They didn't like it. They were very dismissive.
Really?
Yeah, they were like, Carl Jung, that's crazy stuff, or that's a cult, or that's weird, and I was like, man, that's so strange. My good friend just said that. Conversely, one of my bosses in the tech space, who was a VP, business guy, MBA, one of the most boring people you can imagine on the surface, but had a lot underneath going on, told him out at a coffee, he just lit up. And he was like,
wow,
what? That is so incredible. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. And then you learn he majored in art history in college. He had this whole other side, an undeveloped part of himself. So there's an opportunity for all of us to look at those underdeveloped parts of ourselves, and through this kind of activity or another activity or something else, begin to open those up. Yeah.
Well, and I would suspect, so the book that you're trying to produce here and that you're producing, I would guess the consumers of that are probably two, at least that I can think of off the top of my head. One are Jungian practitioners of some level, right? Because it would be a reference, right? Let's go look in the index. I want to learn about dream interpretation and the body thing you talked about, right? You could find the page and look at it. Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember learning that. That would, just like your little squares, it would spark their memory from probably learning similar things in their education. That's maybe easier to enter into than to read like a really dense book about the process, where you could actually look at it and just be reminded and, oh, that's right, okay, let's try this. Maybe we'll put a little spin on it and do this other thing and experiment a little bit, right? So that would be one space. I think the other space would be like maybe someone like me I don't know anything about Jungian thinking. It might be really fascinating to go think of this as a primer in a way, right? Of maybe it's a little deeper than that, but to be able to look through and understand like, oh, okay, this is kind of, you would form an opinion off of it, but it's more approachable and accessible than a very dense, tome in German or something, right? Or you'd have to learn German to like read it and understand it in the original language or whatever, right? Because Jung, I think he was Swiss, I think, wasn't he? He was a contemporary and a little bit of I always remember that he and Freud were sort of like frenemies, I guess. I don't know. Like
That's a good way to put it.
Is that the right way to describe them?
he was a protege, and then they were arch enemies after their falling out. Yeah, unfortunately. Or at least Freud exiled Jung from the realm because their theories diverged in places that were irreparable, apparently.
Interesting.
But no, you're right. One thing is, this book is not an explainer text. So it's not like, because we have to remember, I sat in these are all live drawings. These were done in the classes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that didn't make the drawing.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
In the hour, it's me going, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's cool. So they're, like you said, they're just sparks. Like you could look at the page and be like, oh, that's a reference to such and such writer. Maybe I'll go read that person. Oh, here's this thing. Maybe I'll go explore that. So there's that. And the other thing for me is it's a memento. It's a milestone of the training. It's like, dude, here's 7 years of your life. Like, you got to turn this into a book, because someday when I'm like 83 and I'm talking to my grandkids or whatever, I want to be like, see,
here it is.
I did a thing. You kids never listen, and I actually did a thing, whether you want to believe it or not.
Yeah.
But for lay people, I think there's also kind of this mystique around, if people even know what Jungians are. Like, there's probably people listening to this podcast that are like, I have no idea what this particular episode's about. But for people that do know the history of psychology and the different methodologies and ways you can work on your psyche, they may be very curious about what the training is. It's kind of this Hogwarts sort of thing with a big door, and how do you walk through the subway portal in the brick wall? How do you, what goes on in there? So this is a nice snapshot into, these are the courses that were taken. This is the material that was covered. The book also has reflections. So it has 180 pages of this, my personal reflections, dreams. So I found key dreams from my training, and I can put those in there. And then exercises. So it has exercises I developed over those 7 years people can use. This one with the travel is one of those exercises.
I bet.
Yeah,
that would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's I want it to be more fun than just here's these drawings. I want it to be active. Yeah.
Yeah. You want to have some practicality out of it as well with actions that you can draw from it. So that explaining that, it seems to me like maybe your primary audience are Jungian practitioners, and maybe they could be people in college who are considering taking a Jungian path and want to know, like you said, there's a big dark door and lots of thick German writings that I don't have to unless you're a German reader, which there's a fair amount of German people that listen to the podcast and watch it. So, but there's lots of opacity to getting an idea of it. So having, if you were in a point where you're considering one approach versus another, this could be a good way. Maybe you check it out at the library, right? Maybe you see this at libraries, right? So that's your gift to the world. And then some kid in the future who's considering this path could get at least some kind of a sense of where this might be headed, right? That could be another thing, right?
Totally. Yeah. And maybe if people are going into heavier thinking function oriented trainings, they can understand, via you and your work and your podcasts and your classes and this book and other things, can see it's okay to process in other ways. It's not, I'm not bad. My second grade none is, which I had, is not hitting me with a ruler because I'm drawing in the margins of my spelling journal or whatever,
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. I think I've sort of come to we just got back from the International Sketchnote Camp in San Antonio, and there was a little bit of talk afterwards. I mean, one of the sessions was about how to make this a business, and I think that's a valid thing, right? Is how do you take these visual skills you have and then use them as a way to share with companies to hire you to do this work for them. I think I'm most fascinated by more like this stuff where it's people keep their day jobs, but they find ways to integrate visual thinking into the work they do, right? They don't have to leave the thing that they're good at, like say you're an accountant or something like that. That's real fascinating, is how do you integrate this visual skill in your unique context? And I think that in some ways can be powerful because I think it can reach a lot deeper inside of organizations and reach to individual people, maybe more than a professional coming and doing visual thinking on demand, which has got value, right? Especially if it's interactive. But it feels like, it can reinforce this idea that, only the professionals can do that. I'm not a good artist. I could never do that. And it kind of reinforces a lot of the work that I've done has been trying to break down those ideas, and that to set the bar really low, you don't really have to be a great artist to do this work.
Right.
Now, if you're really good at it, you could elevate to that level.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to hear this and think the work you're practically doing could impact the Jungian space in a way that maybe hasn't been done since the beginning. I don't know. This seems pretty unique to me.
No one's ever drawn all their classes. It's the first. Yeah. It's the first. Either I'm a madman or I'm onto something. I don't know. Maybe both. But per your comment, think about how much rigid thinking there is in society. Just in terms of politics or theoretical spaces or other things where people are either here or they're here. And having just a civilization that has more plasticity in our thinking and a way to look at things from different directions doesn't mean we have to agree with them, but we can at least examine them, open up, feel things through. I mean, that would be so wonderful to have scientists thinking that way, to have mayors and people leading towns, politicians, teachers, everybody just kind of drawing as a way of thinking, because it is so divergent, it's really like that. I mean, at some point it comes back in, but it's just a wonderful, rich external exploration. Yeah.
This has been really fun to see, and we'll definitely have to have you take a couple of shots of maybe a couple of pages and some samplings of these little squares and so we can include those in the show notes. Maybe throw them on your site or something, or social media or wherever, so people can see. If they're listening, you can click on the link and see those images.
Oh yeah,
we'll do that for you. The Sketchnote Army podcast is brought to you by the Concepts Sketchnote Workshop video, a unique, free, hands-on workshop video where I show you how I use the Concepts app to create sketch notes on an iPad Pro with an Apple Pencil. In this 1 hour, 18-minute video, I cover the infinite canvas as a sketchnoting power feature, how vectors give you complete control of brushes and sizing as you create sketch notes, and how vector elements let you size and repurpose your drawings for ultimate flexibility. The workshop video includes answers to common questions about concepts. Watch the workshop video for free at rodesign.com/concepts. Be sure to download the Concepts app at concepts.app and follow along with me during the workshop. See you there. So that brings me to, typically this is where we talk about tools. I'm really curious about the tools that you chose here. It seems like you went really simple, right? You had a pad, you had a fine liner, and then a Copic for shadows, and that was pretty much it. Tell me a little bit more about the tools you chose and why.
Yeah, so one trick you know well, and I know, and others that have been drawing for a little while, is if you're going to do a set, find your most comfortable tool and stick with it throughout the whole set. Like, probably don't switch. So I just happened to have my architectural drawing tools on that day in Boston, and it was a 0.5 Stadler.
Fine liner. Super popular.
And a Fabriano pad, which I'll get it. It's right here.
I think I've had Fabriano pads in the past, more like a spiral bound.
No, it's this recycled paper and bleached, and it's so.
Wow!
I love this. You may have trouble ordering them because I ordered so many because I wanted to make sure. Yeah, but these are great, and it's this really crisp white paper. It's sort of between paper and Bristol, like
it's like a cardstock almost.
Yeah, 94 pounds.
Okay, so it's somewhat heavy.
Yeah, those, and then for other illustrations I use the Neuland markers, which I learned from you, and like that gives a thicker line, like that. And then I use a Copic N2 grayscale.
Add some tone.
Yeah, and that's it. Just keep them real simple. The book will not be digitized, so this is going to be a print-only book, which I do that for a number of reasons. I might have to self-publish it. I've had some good conversations with publishers, but the response has been basically, we don't know how to handle 180 pages of. we don't do that. Like that's beyond where we're at. And some of the graphic novel publishers, it's not really in their.
Yeah, it sort of falls in this middle space in a way, right?
Totally. So if anybody's listening and they want to give me a holler about a book deal, if there's any agents out there or anybody, please don't hesitate.
Wow. And then for the little squares, did you just take that same pad and pull them out of the book and then cut them in quarters? How did you produce your little squares?
Exactly.
Are those okay? No,
totally same. So they're 6 to a page. They fit 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and I draw them in here, and then I cut them out.
And then you cut them out. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you probably use your maybe a pencil to stroke the break points for the 6 panels, and then work your way through them and cut them out at the end. Probably good for managing, like on that trip, right? You would keep them in a central place so that they wouldn't get lost, because I would think with loose squares like that, like ordering them then becomes more complex than if they're bound into a book, at least maybe while you're doing the production.
I actually cut them out every night because
Okay.
the payoff was like, if you spread like 55 squares on a table, it's pretty visually impactful. And I wanted to talk to people. I didn't know anybody as I drove across the country. So if I arrived in Minneapolis and was at some cool cafe, you know, oftentimes another artist would come up and be like, "Oh, dude, what are you doing? Like, that's really cool."
Yeah.
I was like, "Hey, who are you?
Yeah.
What do you do?" You know? Yeah.
Make another square.
Exactly.
Interesting. It's like the thing beget more things in a way.
Yeah, kind of is.
That's funny. So we'll definitely we'll get some links for specifics for you guys out there listening if you want to check out these pads. Let's shift into practical tips. So this is where I invite people to do tips for listeners. And the way I frame it is, imagine there's a visual thinker listening. Maybe they've reached a plateau, or they're just feeling a little bit burnt out, or you know, they just want to see a change. What would be 3 practical or theoretical tips that you might offer them?
Yeah, totally. The first is going to be draw where you aren't conventionally permitted to do so. Like, push the boundaries of drawing. So if everybody else on the bus is on their phones or staring out the window at the raindrops, like, draw. If you're at a lecture, if you're at the symphony, if you're at a very boring social function with your in-laws, you've got to be careful there. But just draw. Like, start to push the edges, and in the massage of that boundary, you will start to loosen up your own expressive capacity. So that would be one, is draw where you're not really encouraged to draw. The other would be, and this is just have the easiest materials possible that you know you will use. Do not, you know, sometimes people want to get into photography and they think that means buying the, 4-foot long telescopic lens and That's not true. The best camera is the one you're going to use. So find tools that feel good in your hand. The pen should feel really good. You should have a relationship with your pen, and then paper that feels really good. For some people, that's going to be more granular. Other people, it's going to be smooth. For some people, it'll roll up nicely. Others will be really, really firm. I just love thick card. I don't know why. Maybe it's my printmaking background or something.
Yeah, it could be.
So that would be the second one, and the third would be the way I learned how to play guitar when I was a punk rock musician. Like, I've had other younger guitarists say, "What advice can you give me on learning guitar and stuff?" And what they expect is you to tell them some scale technique or something. That's not it. It was, this will sound so weird, but to fall asleep with my guitar. So to actually at night play it. This is a long time ago I learned to play guitar. You're watching like David Letterman on TV around midnight or whatever it was on. Playing guitar, listening, always was in my hand. Like, as in college in my apartment, that guitar was in my hand. I'd fall asleep and that guitar was with me. I might wake up in the middle of the night and kind of remember a melody and I'd pluck it out. I'd kind of fall back asleep. It was always there. So related to that, try to have your drawings and your materials with you as often as possible. Another reason these are this size is because one of my favorite coats has an interior breast pocket right here. And I capture my dreams too. So I draw, because I'm a Jungian, like I draw various dreams I've had. And then I will take those dreams, and this is an exercise in the book actually, and I will put them in the breast pocket of that jacket in the winter with my big scarf on, and I'll walk around the city and I'll sit at cafes, and then I'll pull the deck back out. I'm not trying to meet people or socialize it during this exercise, but I'll reflect on things. I'll put it back in my pocket, walk some more throughout the city. Might take an hour or two to walk. I walk a lot. Go to the next place, pull them out, look at them, shuffle them around, have a relationship with them. So it's the third bit of advice is that, like, try to have you and your tools as close to each other as possible to develop that relationship and to open up those channels of expression and communication with yourself, because that's really what's going on, right? You got to talk with your deeper self to get in touch with these processes.
You want the tools to kind of step out of the way and be there when you need them and perform.
Yeah.
And to do that, like I think I just recently, I've been bullet journaling for years. I just recently bought a leather. I could show you this leather thing that I had made, right? Yeah. So just a leather wrapper for a Neuchtterm. I had my little logo put here in the corner.
Oh, cool.
And then I decided to get a Lamy Safari fountain pen.
Oh, nice. I love those.
And it feels great in my hand. It's got weight to it. I actually just shifted the tip from a fine to a medium because I wanted more juice out of my ink. I like juicy inks and they need to flow. And I've noticed that it's changed my relationship with writing. Like I really enjoy the writing a little more. And all I did was change the tip, which is really easy on a Lamy. You put Scotch tape and you pull it off and you just stick the other one on. You can even do it with ink inside. It's crazy.
Wow.
So it's really interesting. Yeah.
I didn't know that. I love Lamy. Yeah. What kind of tip did you put on it? Like a more fine one or a thick?
Yeah, well,
thicker flow?
I bought it with the fine tip on it, and it felt scratchy to me, and it kept bothering me, especially when it would run out of ink.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do it. The ink is low. This is the time to do it. So I looked up a video.
Okay.
And it showed you could do it when it was loaded with ink. So you just, because the tip sits on top of the feed, and you just use some Scotch tape and you put it on and you pull out and down and it just pops off. Oh, you take the other one and just snap it on there and start writing.
Wow.
It's a really ingenious design from Lamy.
I gotta look at that. I gotta look at that.
Yeah.
And do you use Noodler's ink? Are you a Noodler's guy, or what are you like?
I have not tried Noodler's yet. For this one, I bought the Lamy ink. I kind of wanted to go all stock with it, but I've heard good things about Noodler's. I haven't tried it. I think it's water resistant, or if not waterproof. So yeah, I think I just have found going back to this tool, which I think the pen was like $40 for this heavy pen, but it changes my relationship with my writing. I've noticed that Neuland markers do the same thing, like the quality. Like there's something to be said by using cheap pens that are available at the grocery store, and the truth is that you can get really excellent pens at a grocery store or a corner drugstore, like Energels or G2s. Really amazing. Like the technology has improved so much that they can also be something that you like. But it seems like my relationship with writing and reflecting in the bullet journal context has changed by switching the tools that I use, and it makes me more expressive. It's a small friction, but it definitely works.
I hear you. I think their stock tips, especially for the fine ones, can be really scratchy, like you're saying.
Yeah. So you got to find. I think it goes back to you finding what are the tools that are right for you, and don't feel like just because everybody uses this tool that I have to. No. You can break from the pack. Be a punk rocker like Justin was. Find the thing that works for you. So, well, this has been really fascinating and fun and enlightening, and I'm looking forward to seeing your book published. I'd love to see it when it comes out and have a print copy. Tell me a little bit more about where people can find you. This is especially helpful if someone has ideas, if you're in the publishing space and you have ideas for Justin about how he might go about it, to reach out to him. Do you have a website? Are you on socials? How would you like people to reach out to you and see your work or chat with you? Yeah,
totally. I have a few things. So for my Jungian work, it's cascadejungianservices.org. So if people want to learn about Jungian stuff or psychedelics in Oregon and how we support that as well here with licensure in the state, they can go to that. For the book, I just got the Instagram handle, The Visual Jung, Jung.
Oh,
so good. That's that. And I'm going to just start posting stuff there. And then for my work as an artist, Justin_Hamacher_studio on Instagram are those are the three best places to get in touch about all those things. Yeah,
and we'll put those in the show notes along with all the other resources. So if you're curious, you can go in there and dig in there and follow your passion and find out more. Well, thanks so much, Justin. This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed the discussion. I know a little bit more about Jungian concepts, not enough to practice, but enough to play a Jungian on TV, I guess. I don't know. But, not really. But it's been really fascinating. It makes me want to dig in a little bit more and understand Jung and like how he got to these ideas, and maybe do some research on how could it apply to me. Like, what are some practices that could help me?
Oh yeah,
so it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, active imagination is a big one. That's the most visual. But I'll send you some links and some books if folks are interested in reading.
Yeah, we'll put them in the show notes for sure. Yeah, I think as visual thinkers, this audience might be well suited for this kind of work, these kind of practices potentially.
I think so. It really resonates. So much image basis in the unconscious and the Jungian space too. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, thanks so much, Justin. Thanks for being on the show, and thanks for the work you're doing. Thanks for helping people in the way that you do. I think it's important that we each find that way, and you found the way, which is great. Listening to your story and how you got to where you are, all that background's going to help you, I think. So thank you for your contribution.
Oh, thanks so much, Mike. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for hosting this podcast. It's really fun to see all the folks out there doing visual thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll never run out of people to interview, which is really great.
Cool.
Well, everyone, if you're watching or listening, this is another episode. Until the next one, talk to you soon. The Sketchnote Army podcast was created by me, Mike Rohde, and brought to you by Rohdesign Studios. It's produced and edited by Alec Polianis of Amp Creative Studios. The theme music was created by John Schiedermeyer. To support the creation of this show, I invite you to buy one of my books, the Sketchnote Handbook or the Sketchnote Workbook. You can find the books on Amazon, or go to peachpit.com and use the code ROHDE40 for 40% off. Please share this podcast with other visual thinking friends, and be sure to leave a nice rating on iTunes or your favorite podcast listening app so others can find the show.